Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be joined by a very special guest right now. We've had a few people on the show. We've had Iron Eagle. We've had a few other little sports personalities, but this one's a little different from the rest because this guy's been at the top, and he's actually encountered Vince McMahon in person, which is quite the feat itself. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring in A.J. Kirsch of WWE Tough Enough fame and independent league wrestler. A.J., how you doing?
I'm doing real good. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to see what you got in store for me.
No, absolutely, and I really appreciate you being here. And, AJ, I had a chance to talk to a lot of people on Twitter and on Facebook who have followed you throughout your career. And why don't you tell us a little bit to start, how did everything start for A.J. Kirsch? How did you decide that, hey, I want to go in this incredibly difficult business of professional wrestling, and where did that all begin?
Well, I was channel surfing one night when I was 12 in the early spring of '96, and I happened upon Monday Night Raw, and I knew about wrestling. Like, I was familiar with some of the bigger names of the '80s, like Hogan and Warrior and all those guys, but I never was really a hardcore fan. But for whatever reason, I was completely hooked that night, and it was an exciting time to become a fan because it was, like I said, it was early spring of '96, so it was just on the cusp of Austin 316, the start era of the emergence of the Attitude Era. So it was and Monday Night Wars were just heating up, so it was a very exciting time to become a fan. And because I became a fan at that time, the wrestling business was on the cusp of this huge change. And so as I was entering my teenage years, wrestling was evolving right along with me. So I think that's a large reason why I call it a phase I never really grew out of. And the more I watched, the more I was captivated. And it didn't take long until I started, thinking about why not actually, try to do this. Like, I am so captivated by this on pretty much every level that I couldn't help. I mean, I think every wrestling fan at one point thinks, like, man, what would it be like? Like, what would it be like to be in there and to have those people cheering me or booing me, or it's crazy to think about it at the time. But then the more I thought about it, the more I really wanted to do it. And I was at the time in junior high school, I think, and I was actually a pretty doughy kid. And I remember reading an interview with Mick Foley saying, if you're too young to actually join a wrestling school, then join your high school wrestling team. So I did, and that got me in shape real quick. Between my junior year and senior year, my junior year I wrestled in the 189-pound weight class. My senior year, I wrestled in the 152-pound weight class. So
wow.
I dropped quite a bit of weight, and I credit being on the amateur wrestling team for the discipline and the drive that I have to this day as far as working, eating right, taking care of myself. And, when I went to school at Chico State in Chico, California, which is about an hour and a half north of Sacramento. And I remember wandering around downtown one night, and this big dude in a luchador mask was handing out flyers. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. Let's check this out. And it was for a local wrestling show. That local wrestling show also had a wrestling school. So as I was going to college and earning my degree, I was also going to wrestling school to, pursue the dream of becoming a professional wrestler.
A.J. Kirsch, scholar / collegiate wrestler, except not collegiate wrestler, professional collegiate wrestler. It's a whole, that's an incredible story as is. And, you mentioned Mick Foley. Mick Foley actually wrestled in high school alongside Kevin James, the guy from King of Queens. And so they were actually on the same high school wrestling team together. So it's funny how all that stuff connects to itself. Now, AJ, you mentioned growing up in the Attitude Era. I myself also, as a much younger than you were, wrestling fan at the time, remembering the heyday of the Attitude Era. You said you fell in love with, at the time, the World Wrestling Federation. Were you going back and forth between all the companies, WCW, ECW, or was this you were loyal to McMahon's product?
I was primarily loyal to the WWE. Like, if they're, during commercials, of course, I'd click over to WCW and see what was going on there, because all these names that I knew as a kid but never really followed as much as I did then were on that show. So it was like, oh, let's see what Hogan's doing nowadays. And, oh, there's Ric Flair. I wonder what he's up to. But the I was always loyal to WWE primarily, but I remember some moments where I was forced to click over to WCW.
Absolutely.
Like when I heard one of them was when Hogan and Goldberg were wrestling for the title on Nitro. I was watching that when I felt a little bit guilty, like I should have been watching Monday Night Raw. But there was, and then the NWO was just groundbreaking at the time.
Absolutely.
And so I remember clicking over from Raw and checking out the NWO on Monday Nitro. ECW I really didn't know about until a little bit later on. Like I'd probably say more like 99, 2000. I actually didn't get the channel that ECW was on. I think it was TNN at the time, until a little bit later. And which is a shame because ECW, the original ECW, just to make that clear,
yes.
I don't think I've ever had any more fun as a fan watching wrestling, because despite their lack of, bells and whistles and pyro and staging and all that, their in-ring product was one of the most diverse for any wrestling promotion ever. I mean, they had some incredible wrestlers. They had the, ridiculous violence. They had some pretty off-the-wall stuff. And as a fan who wasn't really smart to the business at the time, I was just like, oh my God, look what they're doing here. Like, this is different from everything else. And so, again, it was just another reason to be extremely excited to be a fan, because there was so much competition, and there was just each promotion was putting out a slightly different product, and it was different from the others enough to keep me wanting to watch all three.
No, I couldn't agree anymore. The competition is what drove wrestling to its pinnacle during the late 90s, early 2000s. And, I mean, you had... The shows were getting ratings in the upper 6s, the 7s. I'm talking Nielsen ratings here. And now you see them, they're barely peaking the high 2s, maybe 3 at best. It's just when you have that lack of competition, it really is something that I think personally affects the product. But we'll talk about that a little later. So at this point, we're talking early, mid-2000s. You're finally starting to break into your own. You're finally getting involved with the indies and stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, not too far into your career, you actually had a chance to face the legendary New Age Outlaws, and you scored a victory over them, correct?
Yeah. That up to that point, that was by far the coolest point in my career for a number of reasons. I mean, one, it was the first chance I had to wrestle, and I was still pretty green at the time, but it was the first chance I had to wrestle somebody who I had grown up watching. And so, as somebody who was still kind of green in wrestling, and for somebody who didn't have a great deal of experience under their belt, to be wrestling a team like the New Age Outlaws, the professional in me was maintaining my composure, but there was that side of me that was like, oh my God, like this is the coolest night of my life. Like, I'm standing in the ring with my tag team partner Nathan Rules, and we were a team called Ego, and this was for All Pro Wrestling, and we were the tag team champions at the time. And then I hear the everybody knows it, that
you didn't know?
You didn't know? And immediately I was just like, oh my God, they're coming up. This is the coolest thing ever. And they were so cool. They were so generous with us. It was so easy to work with those guys. And they were very gracious and willing to give us the victory. I scored a pinfall victory over Billy Gunn with the help of our manager. And to top it all off, it was on my birthday.
There you go.
It was on my birthday, yeah. So it was just one of those nights where it was just like, you could not have written a better night for me personally.
That's
as
awesome.
A wrestling fan and somebody coming up in the business. It was, it was just one of those nights that I'm never ever going to forget.
Now, I want to talk about, because you're saying you had the help of the manager and stuff, so you're coming in that as the heel team. As a wrestler, do you prefer being heel or baby face? What is it for you that caters to the crowd? Because, if you go back, and we'll talk about Tough Enough in a little bit, but a guy like Luke Robinson, he's the tailor-made heel. This is a guy who, goes out there, just messes with the crowd. Do you like being heel, or do you like being the guy that the crowd cheers for?
I love being a heel. I like going out there, and I like, can I swear on the show?
Go for it.
Okay. I like stirring shit up.
There you go.
It's the different type of energy you get from the crowd being heel than being a baby. Being a baby is like if I had to choose, I'd probably say I enjoy working heel more, but because it's the energy that you get when you're a heel, when you're trying to stir up that crowd and you're trying to get that energy out of like, you suck, I hate you, I hope you get your ass kicked. It's different from, hey, go, woo, and they're, chanting your name. It's cool. It's really cool. But it's like that energy that comes out when you piss somebody off is so palpable. You can almost touch it. You can almost feel it coming off them. Look at their face, it's sour. Their brow is all furrowed. They're just looking and pointing right at you, and you've got all this venomous energy coming at you, and you're getting that out of them. It's a powerful feeling to get that emotional reaction out of somebody, which I think it feels a little bit different from when people are cheering for you or chanting your name. But when you get that kind of just, you son of a bitch reaction out of somebody, it's a powerful feeling.
A.J. Kirsch, the real #heel.
Heel at heart.
Very, very true. And lastly, in terms of your in-ring work, and I've talked to some people in the business before about this, and I've read interviews, seen interviews. Are you the type of guy who likes to plan a match out ahead of time, or do you like to call it in-ring, be your own in-ring general, and then